Hello, and welcome to CTR Cyber 5. 5 tips in 5 minutes for effective cybersecurity internal controls. I'm your host, Jenny Hederman, Risk Counsel with the Office of the Comptroller. And I'm really pleased to have our guest today, Jennifer Sanders, a corporate attorney who specializes in technology. Jennifer has been practicing for over 25 years in the privacy, security, and technology field at many different size corporations, technology and consulting, from startups to mid-size to Fortune 100 companies. And Jennifer is going to be giving us 5 tips for providing data to third parties. So we'll jump right in to cyber tip number 1. Welcome, Jennifer.
Thank you, Jenny. It's Team Jenny's. Hi, everybody. We're going to talk about giving your data to third parties. And what we want to start with is even understanding when you're giving your data to third parties. A lot of people may not understand this because you're just working through your internal systems, but you're using third-party contractors. You might be using a CRM database or your HR systems, or providing it to your instances in the cloud, AWS or Google, giving it to consultants to perform services for you. And by providing it this data, who it's not just giving them the data, such as loading it into a system, even if that system, it's a cloud system integrating with your systems, you're still giving access to those vendors, whether it sits on their systems or they can just see it. So just want to make sure people are aware when you're using any of these third-party systems, you are providing data to these systems. And so you want to be very attentive to who you're giving your data. Let's go on to tip number 2. So you want to define what data you're providing these systems. So do you really need to give that system all of that information? A lot of these can be configured. So say your HR system and you're allowed to configure the fields. Does it really need everybody's health data? Or if you're giving data to, putting data in the cloud, be careful that it is going into an instance that is somehow supported and monitored for what you're using it for. So look at what access the vendors have. And again, you're providing that data to that system. Look at what access that vendor will have across systems. If you're using it for marketing and they're looking into your customer databases, what can they see? Again, access, or what do they have them what data are they actually taking? So just be sensitive that when you provide it in these IT systems, you're actually giving those third parties data, and you want to follow management standards around this because you are responsible for the use of that data. So even though you're giving it to a third party for the contracted use, as the entity that collected the data, you are responsible for it. You and your function, you and your, your role, your function, your entity, et cetera, you are responsible for that data. So let's go to tip number 3. So we want to make sure that if we're providing data to third parties that we have the right to do that. And this is a huge hot area right now. So if you've gotten data, of course you have the right to process it for the right, whatever you've disclosed to the user. So if it's for to provide services and I need to give that data to the fulfillment entity, I will have disclosed that to the user and gotten that permission. Or if I'm getting HR data, of course, we have HR, we run HR internally, and I'm using an HR system. I'm going to have the permissions in the employment agreement to give that HR system that data. But they don't need anything beyond what we've gotten the permissions to give them that data for. So just be careful. Don't give them everything because it's a convenient place to store it, or you may do downstream processing. So make sure you have the right permissions when you're providing data to third parties to perform services, and that they're only performing those services. Let's go on to tip number 4. Okay, so this is where it gets much more interesting. So even though, and I alluded to this earlier, if you're providing data to a third party, you are still responsible for how they handle that data. So you can't say, oh, no, we got all the customer data, but so-and-so was breached, or so-and-so marketed to them, or so-and-so sold it off to a email newsletter agency. You are responsible because you have that relationship with the user. You collected the data, and this third party is just providing a service on your behalf. They're not, so you want to make sure that you've vetted this vendor, you're working with them. What can they do with that data? Can they only use it specifically for the service they're providing for you? Like in your instance, your customer data or your HR management instance, do they have to stay within that? Or can they take that data and anonymize and aggregate it with other customer data, entity data that they have to get insights and statistics? You want to be very careful, and that's something to probably reach out to legal on because it gets complicated. But when you're working with vendors, look at the both the contractual limitations of why you're providing them the data. And again, contracts are helpful, but they really are just words on paper. So you want to look at the technical limitations. So if you need to stop that vendor's use or throttle that vendor's use or restrict it, what technical limitations do you have? Can you actually, wall off their access? Can you throttle and stop their access? Are they caching it, et cetera? So you want to really look at your technical limitations and what you can do, and also your fallback. What would that do to you? What's your reliance on their service? So you want to prohibit uses that you don't approve, and also make sure you can monitor those, because again, you remain responsible. You may have some remedy against the vendor, but ultimately you're responsible. Let's go on to tip number 5. And this is another good one. So if you are, although you can have airtight contracts, your attorneys can hand them a phone book that makes them completely liable. If they are you want to look at their reputation. Do they have they been doing these practices? Are they, do they look like they have strong controls? And a good way to do this is to have your people talk to, depending on the level of data, like I like to have my security team talk to the security team of the vendor, because they speak the same speak. So depending on what you're doing, you're responsible for that data, that vendor. If it's, something that's very simple or low level, you just go check their websites. There's ways to look at them, but ultimately you try to vet these vendors, because ultimately you retain that responsibility. This is just going to save you so much headache downstream. And in understanding your business, it's going to give you more relationship with the vendors, making sure they're following through on things. If you're using a marketing agency and you give them data to handle your marketing operations, and then you terminate the relationship, don't just assume that they've deleted that data. Follow up, make sure they have safely deleted that data or gotten rid of it. So again, find out, work closely with your vendors. Again, these aren't things that you just sign up, put in a contract, and it's all one and done. So it's working closely with your vendors, and it can make your job really fun, because understand things better and look into the relationships. Thanks, Jenny.
Great. Thank you so much, Jennifer Sanders. I love all that information on third-party vendors. For more information on cybersecurity internal controls and CTR Cyber 5, check out our website at macomptroller.org. Thank you so much for watching CTR Cyber 5, and we'll see you soon.